The check was still warm from my grandfather's hand when my mother locked the front door. The click echoed louder than the birthday song had. "Give it to your brother," she said, standing between me and the hallway. 20 guests watched. Paper plates. Half-eaten cake. My brother avoided my eyes. It was my 27th birthday. Grandpa had just smiled and said, "For your future." Now my mother's voice cut through the frosting sweet air. "He needs it more." No one defended me. No one laughed it off. Have you ever felt the room decide your worth before you could speak? I folded the check carefully and slipped it into my purse. And that was when I realized this wasn't about money. Growing up, "He needs it more," was a sentence I heard often. If there was one slice of cake left, he needed it more. If there was tuition help, he needed it more. If there was patience, forgiveness, understanding, somehow, he always qualified first. I learned early not to argue. It made things smoother. My brother was older by 3 years. Loud. Charismatic. Prone to ideas that sounded brilliant at dinner and collapsed by morning. My parents called him ambitious. When his small business failed at 23, they called it bad luck. When I stayed late at my accounting job, they called me safe. Safe never needed support. Safe was expected to manage. Have you ever been labeled responsible so early that it became a cage? By the time I was 27, I had a steady career, modest savings, and a small apartment I paid for myself. Nothing flashy. Nothing risky. My brother, on the other hand, had a new adventure every year. Cryptocurrency. A cafe. A delivery startup. Each one required a little more funding. Each time, my parents stepped in. Not always with money. Sometimes with co-signed loans. Sometimes with emotional pressure aimed in my direction. "You're doing fine," my mother would say. "He's struggling." Struggling was currency in our house. Stability was invisible. Grandpa was the only one who saw the difference. He lived quietly on the outskirts of town. He noticed things. The way I paid my own car insurance. The way I visited him every Sunday without being asked. 2 weeks before my birthday, he had called me. "I've made a decision," he said. "And I want you to accept it without apology." I didn't know what he meant. Until the check appeared in that cream envelope with my name written carefully in blue ink. $600,000. Not as a loan. Not as a family fund. For your future. And in that moment, something shifted in the room. My mother's smile tightened. My brother leaned forward too quickly. Dad cleared his throat. The celebration ended early. The door locked. "Give it to your brother," my mother repeated. "He's launching something important. This could change his life." I looked at her. "And mine?" I asked quietly. "You don't need it," she said. Need. That word again. Have you ever realized that being capable makes you a target for sacrifice? I didn't argue. Instead, I walked toward the hallway. My mother stepped in front of me. "You are not leaving with that check." Her voice was calm. Controlled. Certain. But something inside me had already decided. If I stayed, the pressure would grow. If I hesitated, the narrative would form. So I did the simplest thing. I reached for the door handle anyway, and my mother's hand tightened around the door handle before I could turn it. "Don't be selfish," she said quietly. Selfish. The word felt heavier than the check in my purse. Behind her, my brother stood near the dining table, pretending to rearrange plates. He wouldn't look at me. He didn't need to. The argument was already framed. "It's not about you," my mother continued. "It's about family." Family. In our house, that word usually meant redistribution. I glanced toward Grandpa. He sat at the end of the table, watching silently. His eyes weren't angry. They were steady. Mom, I said softly, Grandpa gave it to me. And you can give it back to the family, she replied. Back. As if it had already belonged to them. Have you ever noticed how quickly ownership shifts when someone feels entitled? Dad finally spoke. We'll manage it responsibly, he said. It's safer in a joint account. Safer. That word made something cold move through me. I had seen joint accounts before. I had seen investments that weren't documented. I had watched money disappear into ventures that never materialized. This wasn't the first time pressure had been applied. 3 years ago, when my brother needed a guarantor for a business loan, my mother had cornered me in the kitchen. You have good credit, she had whispered. Sign this. I almost had. Until I read the fine print. Have you ever felt the early warning signs and convinced yourself you were overreacting? Tonight felt similar. Polite smiles. Calm voices. Logical framing. You're stable, my brother said finally, as if offering reassurance. You'll rebuild. Rebuild what? My future? My safety? My choices? The air in the room felt thick with expectation. Grandpa cleared his throat gently. I gave it to her, he said. Not loud. Just firm. My mother didn't turn toward him. Dad, she said, we're thinking long-term. So am I, he replied. The silence that followed wasn't loud. It was revealing. And in that silence, I realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't spontaneous. They had already discussed what would happen if Grandpa left something directly to me. The door being locked wasn't panic. It was preparation. Have you ever realized you were the last one to know the plan about your own life? My pulse slowed instead of racing. That surprised me. I expected fear. Instead, I felt clarity. I stepped back from the door. Fine, I said evenly. Relief flickered across my mother's face. But I'm going to the bank first thing in the morning, I added. Her relief disappeared. There's no rush, she said. There it was. Urgency was only allowed when it benefited them. I slipped my purse over my shoulder. I'll see you tomorrow, I said calmly. And this time, I didn't wait for permission. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was scared. Because I was thinking. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter under the soft yellow light. I didn't open it again. I didn't recount the number. $600,000. It wasn't just money. It was possibility. I kept replaying my mother's face when I said I was going to the bank. Too quick to discourage. Too quick to delay. Have you ever noticed that the people who push for urgency suddenly prefer patience when control slips? At 8 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Mom. I let it ring once before answering. Good morning, she said, overly light. We talked last night. It's better if we deposit the check together. We? I already have plans, I replied. Silence. You're making this complicated, she said softly. No, I answered. I'm making it clear. There was a pause long enough for tension to form. You don't trust your family, she asked. That question almost made me laugh. Trust had always been one-directional. I hung up politely. I dressed simply. Neutral blazer. Low heels. No dramatic energy. Just routine. The bank lobby smelled faintly of coffee and paper. The marble floors reflected the overhead lights. People stood in line discussing mortgages and savings accounts. Normal life. I approached the counter calmly and handed the teller the check. She glanced at the amount and blinked once. I'll need to get the branch manager, she said. Of course. I waited. 2 men in suits stepped out from behind the glass offices. One introduced himself as Mr. Carlyle. Ma'am, he said gently, can you step into my office? The door closed quietly behind us. He placed the check flat on his desk. Can you tell me how you received this? He asked. My grandfather gifted it to me yesterday, I replied. He studied my face carefully. Not skeptical. Concerned. Do you have identification? He asked. I handed it over. He typed something into his computer. His expression changed. Subtle. But real. Have you ever watched a professional struggle to keep their composure? He cleared his throat. Ma'am. I need to ask you something important. My pulse slowed. Yes? This check was flagged this morning. Flagged? I repeated. For unusual activity. My stomach tightened slightly. What kind of activity? He looked at the screen again, then back at me. It appears someone contacted our fraud department at 7:12 a.m. to report this check as potentially coerced. Coerced. The word felt surreal. As in, he continued carefully, the recipient may be under pressure to surrender funds. The room felt very quiet. Not chaotic. Just precise. Have you ever realized someone tried to move first, and miscalculated? He leaned back slightly. Ma'am, he said slowly, his voice losing its professional distance, you need to call the police. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Call the police? I repeated. Mr. Carlyle nodded once, his expression controlled but serious. Yes. Someone attempted to freeze this transaction under the claim that you were being pressured or manipulated into surrendering the funds. Manipulated. The word hung between us. I'm not, I said quietly. I can see that, he replied. But the report wasn't filed by you. I didn't need to ask who had filed it. 7:12 a.m. My mother's call had come at 8:03. Have you ever watched a timeline rearrange itself in your mind? They were trying to stop me, I said softly. He didn't respond directly. Instead, he turned his monitor slightly toward me. There it was. A formal fraud alert request. Filed by a family member. Concern for financial coercion. The irony almost felt clinical. They were trying to protect the family assets, he said carefully. Family assets. The check wasn't even deposited yet. It was already communal. I exhaled slowly. So what happens now? We can proceed, he said. But I strongly recommend you document everything. If someone falsely reports coercion, that's serious. Serious. The word didn't frighten me. It steadied me. For years, I had allowed pressure to stay emotional. This time, it had crossed into documentation. Have you ever noticed how control becomes reckless when it feels threatened? I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. I didn't want drama. I didn't want sirens. But I also didn't want a false narrative attached to my name. Mr. Carlyle's voice softened. Ma'am, if you're safe and not under duress, you're within your full rights to deposit this. Safe. I almost smiled. For the first time in my life, someone asked whether I was safe before asking what I would give. I'm safe, I said clearly. He nodded. I'll process the deposit. The printer hummed quietly. Paper slid out. Receipt confirmed. Funds pending clearance. As he handed me the copy, he added gently, if anyone pressures you again, let us know. Again. He assumed there would be another attempt. He wasn't wrong. When I stepped back into the lobby, my phone vibrated repeatedly. Missed calls. Mom. Dad. My brother. The narrative was shifting already. I stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air. The sky looked ordinary. The world hadn't collapsed. But something had cracked. Not the family. The illusion of control. Have you ever realized that someone's panic reveals more than their anger? I didn't call them back immediately. Instead, I sat in my car and let the quiet settle. They tried to freeze the check. Not discuss it. Not negotiate it. Freeze it. That wasn't protection. That was intervention. And interventions usually happen when someone believes ownership is shared. It wasn't. Not legally. Not morally. Not emotionally. And for the first time, I wasn't asking for permission to be why the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, my phone had stopped vibrating. That was worse. Silence in my family usually meant strategy. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of laundry detergent and clean fabric. Ordinary. Grounded. I set my purse on the counter and looked at it for a long moment. $600,000. Cleared soon. Untouchable. My phone rang again. Dad. I answered this time. What did you do? He asked. No greeting. I deposited a check that was legally given to me, I said evenly. There was a pause. You embarrassed your mother at the bank. I almost laughed. She reported the check as coerced, I replied calmly. That wasn't embarrassment. That was escalation. Silence. She was trying to protect you, he said. From what? He didn't answer. Have you ever noticed how protection is often used to mask control? My brother took the phone. You didn't have to involve the bank, he said, frustration barely contained. I didn't involve them, I said. You did. Another silence. You don't understand how this looks, he continued. I did. It looked like I wasn't surrendering. And that was unfamiliar territory. I understand perfectly, I said. My mother's voice appeared faintly in the background. Tell her she's tearing this family apart. There it was. The final tool. Guilt. Have you ever realized that boundaries are labeled betrayal by the people who benefit from your compliance? I'm not tearing anything apart, I said quietly. I'm just not handing something over. Dad exhaled sharply. So that's it? You're choosing money over family? The question almost sounded rehearsed. No, I replied. I'm choosing myself. That was the line they weren't prepared for. Selfish was acceptable. Independent was tolerable. Choosing myself was unacceptable. You'll regret this, my brother muttered. I ended the call gently. Not angry. Just finished. The quiet afterward felt different than before. Not tense. Defined. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. I transferred a portion of the funds into a long-term investment account. Another portion into a savings structure that required two-factor authorization. No joint access. No emergency override. Clear boundaries. Then I did something I hadn't expected. I texted Grandpa. Deposited safely. Thank you. He responded within minutes. Proud of you. 2 words. No guilt. No conditions. Have you ever realized that true support doesn't demand redistribution? That night, no one from my family called again. No apologies. No further arguments. Just distance. But this time, the distance wasn't punishment. It was adjustment. They had tried urgency. They had tried authority. They had tried intervention. And none of it worked. For the first time, I wasn't the flexible one. And something in their system had to recalibrate. The next morning, the house felt unusually quiet. Not tense. Not waiting. Just quiet. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the early traffic move along the street. People headed to work. Deliveries being made. Ordinary life continuing. My phone stayed silent. For years, silence from my family would have made me anxious. It usually meant I had disappointed someone. This time, it felt like space. Have you ever realized that peace can feel unfamiliar when you're used to pressure? Around noon, my brother texted. Mom didn't sleep. I stared at the message for a moment. It wasn't an apology. It was leverage. I typed slowly. I did. 3 words. Clear. Neutral. No accusation. No softness. He didn't respond. In the afternoon, my mother called again. I let it ring once, then answered. Her voice sounded different. Less commanding. More controlled. We were worried about you, she said. I know, I replied. You could have handled this privately. It was private, I said. Until someone reported it. Silence. You're making us look bad, she added quietly. There it was. Image. Reputation. Control. Have you ever noticed how quickly concern shifts to optics? I didn't mention your name, I said calmly. The bank simply followed procedure. She inhaled slowly. You're changing, she said. No, I replied. I'm clarifying. The call ended without resolution. But something had shifted. Not dramatically. Structurally. For the first time, I wasn't negotiating my worth in real time. I wasn't explaining why I deserved something given to me. I wasn't softening my decisions to preserve comfort. I was simply holding them. That evening, I reviewed the bank confirmation again. Funds pending clearance. Fully secured. I transferred another portion into a long-term trust account, something that required my signature alone. No shared oversight. No emergency claims. Just autonomy. Have you ever noticed how empowering it feels to remove the possibility of forced compromise? The following day, Grandpa stopped by unexpectedly. He didn't ask about the argument. He didn't mention the check. He just looked at me carefully. You okay? He asked. Yes, I said. He nodded once. That's what I wanted. No lecture. No guidance. Just trust. And that was when I understood something clearly. This wasn't about $600,000. It was about breaking a pattern. The pattern where my stability became a resource. Where my patience became a tool. Where my silence became agreement. Now, it wasn't. And the quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was steady. At a week passed before my father showed up at my door. Not with anger. Not with demands. Just himself. He stood there awkwardly, hands in his jacket pockets, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. I won't come in, he said. I just wanted to talk. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The air felt cool. Neutral. He looked older than he had at my birthday dinner. We didn't handle that well, he began. No drama. No raised voice. Just fact. I waited. We panicked, he admitted. Your brother's finances aren't what we told you. I didn't respond. Because I had already suspected that. He's in debt, Dad continued quietly. More than we realized. When your grandfather gave you that check, your mother saw it as a solution. A solution. To someone else's choices. Have you ever noticed how quickly your opportunity becomes someone else's rescue plan? She shouldn't have reported it, he added. That was as close to an acknowledgement of wrongdoing as I was going to get. I know, I said. He looked at me carefully. You're not angry. I was, I replied. For a long time. Not about the money. About the expectation. He nodded slowly. You've always been the reliable one. There it was again. Reliable. I held his gaze. Reliable doesn't mean replaceable. He looked down at the sidewalk. No, he said quietly. It doesn't. We stood there in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. I don't expect you to fix his mistakes, he said finally. That's on us. That sentence landed differently. For the first time, responsibility was facing the right direction. Have you ever waited years to hear the weight shift off your shoulders? My mother didn't come. Not that day. Not the next. But 3 days later, she called. Her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. I reacted badly, she said. No excuses. No framing. Just that. You tried to freeze my check, I replied calmly. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid of losing control. The honesty surprised me. Control. She had finally named it. You weren't losing control, I said gently. You were losing access. Silence. Then a small exhale. You're not wrong, she whispered. We didn't repair everything in that call. We didn't rewrite childhood patterns. But something important happened. She stopped positioning my independence as betrayal. My brother called later that week. Not to argue. Not to demand. I messed up, he said. That was new. I thought it would just work out, he admitted. It usually did, I replied. Another silence. I'll figure it out, he said. And for the first time, I believed him. Because I wasn't stepping in. The money cleared fully 3 days later. I received the confirmation email at 9:14 a.m. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it. I transferred a portion into investments. A portion into a savings vehicle that required deliberate withdrawals. And a portion into something symbolic. I booked a small consultation to start my own side venture. Something I had postponed for years because I was always stable. Have you ever realized that stability can also become stagnation when it's defined by others? Grandpa visited again on Sunday. We sat on my balcony drinking tea. I didn't give you that money because you needed it, he said. I know. I gave it to you because you wouldn't waste it. I smiled. Not because of the money. Because of the trust. Over time, the family dynamic shifted. Subtly. No more urgent group messages about helping him out. No more assumptions that I would co-sign something unseen. When finances came up, they were careful. Measured. Respectful. Not because I argued. Because I acted. Because when control crossed into accusation at the bank, I didn't collapse. I clarified. Have you ever noticed how calm decisions unsettle chaotic systems? The check wasn't just a gift. It was a test. Not from Grandpa. From life. Would I hand over my future to preserve comfort? Or would I hold it and redefine my place? I chose to hold it. And nothing burned down. The world didn't punish me. My family didn't disappear. They adjusted. And so did I. If this story resonates with you, like the video and share your thoughts below. Sometimes protecting what's yours isn't greed. It's growth. This wasn't about $600,000. It was about breaking a pattern. And that was the real inheritance. What would you have done in my place? Comment below.